Have you heard the story about the new college graduate? She was looking for an accounting job, and so she was interviewing at several locations. And one of the places she interviewed was a very small company, a sole proprietorship, consisting of just one person. As the interview went on, she was asking the owner about the job responsibilities. And the owner said, "Well, really, I'm just looking for someone to do my worrying for me." You see, he had started the business many years before, and he was simply tired of worrying about things. "Okay," she said, "that sounds interesting, but what is the pay?" And he thought for a second, and he said, "I'll start you out at $80,000. She said, "Wow, that's great. I'll take it." But then as she looked around the office at the tattered, worn-out furniture, the threadbare curtains, she said, "But if you don't mind my asking, how can you afford such a large salary?" And the owner chuckled and he said, "Well now, it's your job to worry about payroll." You know, that's what I need in life, is a designated worrier. Someone who will pick up all of that worry that I have in my life and be responsible for it. Because I don't know about you, but to me, worrying is an art form. And as much as I may hear or say, "Don't worry," as many times as I might intellectualize the notion of leave it all up to God, well, that doesn't really help. I still worry. But unlike the owner who is looking for a designated worrier, that is not the advice that Jesus gives us. Jesus says we can't foist our worry off on someone else, that we have to deal with it ourselves. And we deal with it by transfiguration, by transformation, by changing worry to promise, fear to faith, tension to trust. Boy, that's a tall order, isn't it? In today's gospel, we hear Luke's account of the end times, and it's easy to assume that all of the things we just heard about are sometime long into the future. A quick glance at the news might convince you otherwise. Jesus mentions war and insurrections, and both of those are part of our daily conversation. If you're looking for war, you look to the Ukraine. If you're looking for earthquakes, look to Nepal. Just a few days ago, they had a massive earthquake. If you look for famine, you can always look at Somalia. These kinds of things are happening in our world every day, all around us. Now, Luke wrote this gospel in maybe year 80 or 85. By the time he put these words to paper, all of these future long-off disasters had actually happened to the community that he was writing to. They had all occurred. So these things did, do, and will continue to happen. It's not like something that is simply going to happen hundreds or thousands of years in the future. We experience this stuff every day. One of my favorite spiritual authors, Father John Kavanaugh, helps to make sense of this by pointing out that every day is a last day. Every time is an end time. The world, its opportunities and its losses, it's constantly passing away. Every day that we live is a unique day that will never, ever happen again. Every generation in its own way experiences its own form of end times. They're a witness to things that have passed away and won't occur again. Now that sounds like a cruel joke, except Jesus tells us that we have to transform this worry into promise. I have a good friend who is pregnant with her first child. And, you know, I've decided that parents, new parents, they've already got this figured out. My friend is able to take all of the worry about having and raising a child and transform that into the notion of promise. The notion of promise of having a baby, promise of having created new life, promise for the future. And that's what we have to do. We have to take worry to promise, fear to faith. Now, along with being an incredible worrier, I am also a planner. And so this gospel's hard for me when it says, just let God put the words into your mouth. As you can see, that doesn't work for me. The juxtaposition, though, of the line where Paul says, if you're not willing to work, you should also be not willing to eat, with this notion of planning helps to give me a little perspective. And I came across this from a priest, Father Thaddeus Kopczynski, and he tells the story about the time he left a very contentious church meeting. He had felt that he had done a terrible job presenting his point. He had let the meeting get out of hand, and he was very frustrated. So on his drive home, he was practicing, replaying conversations in his head. Have any of you done that? Oh, if only I would have said. He was thinking about what his points were, what he should have said, how the meeting should have gone, and he ran into the car right in front of him at a stoplight. His internal monologue was literally a car wreck. And as he was waiting for the tow truck to come and tow his car away, he said he had this epiphany, this realization that things did not work when it was a monologue. And in this case, it was totally a monologue of him talking to himself about what he should have done. And he realized that there was someone missing from that conversation, and that was God. Whenever we open up our conversations to God, whenever we open up ourselves to God, then we have the mechanism to transfer fear to faith. We can move beyond being afraid of the world, afraid of the end times, and move into a world where we can let God put words in our mouths or words in our hearts. His transformation was a car wreck, and hopefully that doesn't happen to us, or doesn't need to happen to us as we consider how to make God part of our conversation. Without God, it's easy to become more fearful, to be less and less open to all kinds of different things, to maybe people who have different opinions, to people who live a different lifestyle, to people who maybe have different values. Our job is not to be afraid of those. Our job is to encounter those, to experience that, and to move from fear to faith. Worry to promise, tension to trust. You can put it in a lot of alliterative forms, but the question is, how do we move beyond where we are? How do we find the trust to give up the tension, the anxiety, the fear that sometimes we just find in our everyday lives? Jesus also gives us a prescription for that, and that prescription is the one that we hear over and over from Jesus, and that is love. Our deepest fears, our greatest worries can only be resolved with the deepest love and how we interact in love with each other. Jesus did not say that he would be our designated worrier, that he would take on all the worries of our life and therefore we could live carefree. But instead, he said, what I will demonstrate for you is unconditional love. And when you live with unconditional love, you can translate worry to promise, anxiety to life. As much as we might worry that we don't deserve it, that's what God offers us. That's what Jesus said he'll do for us. Not to do our worrying, but to show us how to love. That's when we transform from fear to faith.